flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is anybody recording the meeting for the public? Thank you, gentlemen. Roll call, please, Mr. Boyle.
Mrs. Harenza.
Here.
Mr. Hershey.
Here.
Mrs. Kuhn.
Here.
Mrs. McAvoy. Mrs. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Pottieger.
Here.
Mr. Redner.
Here.
Mrs. Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Waxler. 7 minutes.
Thank you.
Well,
Welcome, everybody. Upcoming meetings. We have a school board business meeting September 18 at 6 o'clock here. And an executive session will be held following this meeting regarding a legal matter. Is there any public comment this evening?
There is.
Hello?
Hello again, everybody. Cliff Nyman, 125 South 4th Ave, West Reading, PA. Is it okay to have these? It's the letter I'm going to be reading today. It's like one paragraph.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not to be just. Are you a school board member?
No.
Okay. All right. I'll just put my copy down there. These are signed copies for all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any interest I'm not able to hand out, would you be able to hand them out to people who aren't available today?
Sure.
Thank you. Stick out everywhere. My apologies. Thank you, sir. Oh, good, I did make enough copies, I was concerned. I thought there was only 9 of you, then I started counting heads when I came in here, and I was like, oh boy. I have to recopy one, I think there's 1, 2, 3 individuals that aren't here. I need to make you 2 more copies, or if you wouldn't mind. making
Yeah, we'll
more
make sure
copies.
they get them, that's fine.
And
Yeah.
actually 3, because Officer Brindley is addressed in that.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. All right, just gonna read the letter and then, there you go. This letter is directed to all the members of the Wyomissing Area School District, WASD board members, Superintendent Robert Scorbia, Assistant Superintendent Melissa Woodward, and Officer Matthew Brindley, School Security. After receiving a letter dated July 7, 2023 from WASD, refusing once again to acknowledge and discuss valid parental concerns with a parent of 2 children in your school district, I, Clinton Nyman, have come to the factual conclusion that the WASD school board members and directors and school security do not put my children's educational needs before their own personal/professional interests. Because of this fact, I am officially directing that all of the above mentioned to do the following regarding my children. Do not talk to or interact with my children in any way, shape, or form unless I, Clinton Nyman, am physically present or you have received prior written approval from me. I do understand that some of you may have other positions within the school district. If my parental directive previously stated interferes or impedes with that, then feel free to reach out to me with alternative options that do not violate my or my children's rights. I will, however, allow my children to attend school events such as assemblies, pep rallies, and graduations without my prior written consent. Signed and dated today's date by me. And the last thing I want to say before I go is that I would strongly encourage all of you to Google the name Brenda Fortes. Brenda Fortes, Fortes. Wonderful story behind that. Do your research. All right, guys. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, moving on to routine approvals of the minutes. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following minutes. May 8, 2023, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Cool. Discussion.
Whole side.
All right. Discussion? We can do this by voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Board liaison updates. Mrs. Waxler is on her way.
I'm going to do curriculum.
Okay, great.
So, sorry, I guess I should have let you know.
No, thank you.
So, anyway, so I'm going to cover curriculum since I met with Dr. Woodard last week. And it was a really productive meeting for me as I'm transitioning into taking over Laurie's current role as curriculum chair. So, Dr. Woodard shared and explained the calendar of evaluating and updating curriculum for elementary and secondary classes, and we reviewed what's being currently worked on, what's being evaluated this year, what's recently been evaluated, the status of those courses, and then what was on the agenda to be evaluated in 2024 and even some into 2025. So that was really helpful for me to see that calendar, and I think Dr. Wood will probably share that out later. We also talked about the process of writing curriculum, what the teachers are doing when they're tasked with doing that over the summer or over the course of the year. And she shared with me a sample curriculum plan that was really helpful for me to take a look at to see what actually goes into curriculum planning. It's nice to see that there's, clearly identifying the knowledge and skills that a student should gain, including, the PA common standards are on there, methods of evaluation, and additional resources. Dr. Woodard also said we'll probably share some of that in a future presentation. We also discussed the math action plan, as we talked about, and she presented last year, and some of the results of the PSSA testing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's definitely several things to celebrate, especially like 5th grade math PSSA scores, which were tremendously good. So that was really exciting. And still other areas I think that we want to see improvement, but definitely I think we would say it's on the upswing for most of the grades. And then those scores will be used for identifying specific areas for improvement for math and for ELA. We talked about some potential focus areas for the instructional coach at the high school, the implementation of 7th, 8th, and 9th ELA intervention to help some of those kids along in those areas. And I think that was pretty much it. We talked about, what we might, want to have presented to the board, including the PSSA scores and where the plan is going along with that. So very informative meeting for me, so I appreciate it. Great. Any questions on that?
Thank you. Mrs. Phillips is usually facilities, but since we're having a facilities presentation, we're going to defer her report to Mr. Cafancelli a little bit later. Mr. Pottieger, finance.
Mr. Boyd, on that briefly, I would say it's kind of a slow period, so really nothing to report out of the ordinary, or probably more reporting, so we'll continue to read throughout the remainder of the year. And there's a couple of things we have maybe growing, and we'll fill everybody in on that as we know more about that. So.
Great, thank you. I would just turn it over to Mr. Cafancelli.
Yeah, I just have one thing to share. Now that we start our 3rd week of school, we have 2 4-day weeks, and this is our first official 5-day week. So again, it's been great getting around all the buildings, the classrooms, and all the activities. Received a thank you letter Friday, kind of came in late, so I didn't have a chance to put it, but I did let the family know that I wanted to share it with the board. And, again, we don't always, in the beginning of the year, get a lot of thank you notes. Sometimes you're getting a question or concern. This is brief, but I wanted to read it for you and recognize a group that sometimes don't get enough credit. Thank you for all your work on the district's transportation this year. I keep hearing terrible stories from other districts due to shortages and other obstacles. You must have spent the summer working to ensure our students were taken care of each day. I've also heard multiple stories about how you have made adjustments. When I say you, it was not directly at me, it was at our transportation department. How you have made adjustments and accommodations to meet the needs of elementary students. The easy way out would have been to make no changes and no one would have followed you. I want you to know that everyone I have talked to has positive things to say about how you handle situations. We are so thankful to you and all of the drivers this year. Have a great weekend, Kara and Neil Zubati. And again, just with our bus drivers, more often than not, they might hear the one thing that maybe is difficult as opposed to all the great things they do. So I know Mr. Sheets and Mr. Boyer are going to make sure that all the drivers get this, and probably represents what a lot of parents think, that they recognize these folks put a lot of time in to take good care of our students. So thank you to this family for reaching out, and thank you to our transportation department. I know that mid-August, Mr. Cafancelli was here doing a facilities update. There's a lot of end of the summer kind of activity, so he's here today to give an update and talk about some things moving forward as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. School Board. We'll start at the high school. This one's very brief. We have a couple outstanding items. It's basically 1 page of punch list items that will be done over Columbus Day. And then that will kind of finish out our contract with Uric. Over the summer, and really just the last 2 weeks, they completed the wayfinding signage. You go to the next one, Mr. Owens. These are all around the high school, the perimeter of the high school. Already received some feedback on it. I think it's very helpful for getting, especially people that aren't familiar with the district, getting them around the building. If the board chooses in the future, I would think we could expand upon this to help people find Flannery Field, the stadium, things of that nature. But I think this is a good start. And I'll let you know if I get any additional feedback.
There are a lot of lost people at Flannery Field.
Yeah. I've taken a few up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There are some lost people.
So, all right, next one, please. All right, that's really it at the high school. I don't expect any questions, but we'll move on to the hills. Over the month of August and a little bit into September, we've had some pretty good progress. So we finished the reception window, the mailboxes got installed prior to school, the cafeteria was ready to go, the paving repairs in the 3rd and 4th grade playground were made. We had one whiteboard and one tack board that was still lingering out there, and that was installed. The generator room in the basement was finished and code compliant and inspected. What has happened recently is the cafeteria window shades have been installed. Now, they're not fully operational yet. They're being wired up. They should be operational this week. The site cleanup, if you guys remember those tall silos and miscellaneous skids and dumpsters, that was all cleaned up prior to the start of school. So I think I met you guys on the 8th, and by the 28th, that was all ready to go. Landscaping, now this was outside the project, so this was under facilities, not Parado. We installed many trees, redid some beds, and really just cleaned up the front of the school and the back of the school, and received some positive feedback on that as well. So those are the completed items. We'll go to the next one, please. Here are just some pictures of some of the landscaping and the roller shades. The bottom picture, bottom middle, there's a shade that completely darkens the room, and there's another one that will let natural light in. So the one that darkens it when they're doing presentations, faculty meetings, whatnot. So, like I said, they're being wired up as we speak, and by the end of the week, they should be operational. Any questions about those pictures or the completed items? Okay,
It looked very nice for back to school night last week.
thank you. Thank you. Next one, please, Ms. Ross. All right, now we're going to get into the outstanding items. We have some asphalt repairs that need to be done that will be no additional cost to the district, and also some seal coat work that needs to be done, basically the parent pickup loop and down by the basement. So that will happen before November, before the plant's close. Fencing, I have confirmation that fencing will be delivered on the 18th of September, and they plan to jump right on that project. So we're hoping to get that next week. Flagpole, I don't have a date, but they may piggyback that work right on the fencing and do it around the same time. Now, they know they have to work around our entry, they have to work around our dismissal. They can't be in the bus loop during that time, so we'll work together on that. The punch list, really since we talked on August 8th, they've completed about half of it. So we had around 20-some pages, we might be down to about 15 at this point. So we've had a productive month and a half. It's a lot of cosmetic work, some things that the general eye won't even notice, but they are working on it. And then, they have plans to do things on Columbus Day as well, and they're going to work around students at this point. And then we all know about the VCT flooring. The flooring has been delivered. We will get that installed. We are on the schedule for June 8th, or whatever that first non-teacher day is. And they'll start that, and we want them out of here before the end of July. So that's the goal. Any questions on the outstanding items?
I have a quick question.
Shoot.
And I drove by the school last night. It actually looked really nice. The flooring, I know that we weren't like really cleaning it really well because we knew that it was going to be replaced.
Yep.
So we just kind of taken a step back and we're cleaning it like it would normally, like everything looks shiny and.
Yes, so
Okay.
what we did is we put 2 coats of wax on it, we scrubbed it, put 2 coats of wax, and I think it looks for anybody that's been in the building, I think it looks pretty good for what it's gonna be. We didn't go crazy with our.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next slide, please. I'll turn this over to Mr. Boyle.
Okay. Not too much change at all. Once again, this is just the overview of the project. So we had $25 million set aside for the project from bond proceeds. The original budget for the project was the $24,016,000 you see there. And then just working top to bottom here. So projected change orders over budget was 1.2 million. Well, the next slide will go a little bit further into that to see where it's by building. The revised budget would be 25,217,000. But there were budget lines, is once again going over those lines built into from the architect that were not going to be used. I.e. there was a line for financing fees which was pretty significant. The financing fees were paid through the bond. So there'll be a, oops, let me go back one slide. Thanks. So $526,337. Those are line items that were not needed in the architectural budget. That $24,016,000. So the estimated total spend on the project would be $24,690,000. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just a breakdown of, and we've been through this slide before, of the budget. This is just a budget for the contingency that the architect included in that overall $24 million original budget. So working left to right, junior senior high school had a budget of $400,000. The Hills had $450,000, and West Reading had a very small budget of $50,000. We looked at the approved change orders. We're at 1.18 for the junior senior high school, 769 for the Hills, and 4,672 for West Reading. There is still that proposed change order out there for the Hills, which I believe is concrete work. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kathryn.
The 145?
Yes.
That's site work.
Site work.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's out there that we just put there as an earmark. That's a very high estimate number. We are looking at that number being a little lower. We do not know what exactly it's going to be yet. The architect and engineer are still working through the change order for that amount there. So we did put the higher estimate in just for that earmark there. So when we're looking at the balance, would be over those budget numbers that were built into that original budget by $781,000 for the high school. West Reading, the Hills at $465,000, and we actually have a surplus of $45,000 at West Reading. So overall, the total amount over budget is at $1.2 million. Just when you're comparing the contingency line item that was in the original budget for change orders, essentially, that the architect and the engineer had, well, more so the architect had built in to the budget.
I should understand this, but what's that $145,000 for site work?
So there was a portion of the site work that was needed around the playgrounds, around basically some of the stormwater management that was not in the base bid. It was missed in the drawings. So they had to do a change order and basically a not to exceed number to get them working. But now the architect and the GC are working together to really hone in that number. So this is going to be one of those that are going to qualify for the 15% once we get all the change orders and all the credits, which we expect some credits too, coming back from the general contractor. So that number is going to reduce.
And just to piggyback, the work's been around for some time, and the parties have gone back and forth 2 or 3 times on what is the ultimate value versus what portion of dollars was already in the contract. So they've been going back and forth. The number has greatly reduced. So I think about the last 4 or 5 months at least, we've had a placeholder as we present the screen, knowing at some point, we are going to come together on these numbers, but it's nothing that's been presented to us. We can't bring anything for board action, so we haven't acted on any, change orders on it until the parties can kind of, refine what is the amount that was not in the original work plan that they had to complete to get through code and get to the next step.
It's a very similar situation to the fire alarm situation we had here at the high school. Very similar.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just, there are some pending credits. You know, we're getting closer to the end of the project, and certainly we also know the 15% is coming in, which I believe is about 100,000, give or take. So again, that's not a large number compared to some of these numbers, but there are 2 credits that are credit areas that are coming into the project.
Correct. Okay. Any questions on the money? All right. We're going to move on. So that basically concludes both projects. We're getting very close. I really hope by the end of September I can check a few more items off that list from the hills, and we'll get even closer. So I'm going to move into Flannery Field renovation. For some of you that were on the board, you remember phase 1. I'm going to go over phase 1, and then I'm going to go over potential scope for phase 2 and kind of next steps. So feel free to ask any questions. I'll give some history. Okay, so back in 2018, we contracted with Turf Track and Court, which is a landscape architect that specializes in outside athletic facilities. And he came up with basically a master plan for up at Flannery Field. So what you're seeing here, in phase 1, we pretty much concentrated here in the middle. We redid the track, added additional lanes in both straightaways. We added new seating, new bleachers for 200 spectators. We added an additional long jump run there, a small storage building. We relocated pole vault and long jump from over here towards the track pavilion to the right side to free up some more spectator areas over here. And we redid the high jump area as well. The field pretty much stayed the same. That was in good shape. Additionally to that, in the project, we also added a chain link fence all the way around the facility to secure basically our property. That is essentially what happened in phase 1. And the reason we chose to break it up, if we would have tried to do everything at that time, we would have had to go for an additional permit, which is basically a year-long process of review, and it would have pushed the project back. So what we did is we broke it up into 2 different phases. So phase 1 is what you see here, what is up there now, and now moving to phase 2.
Can I ask you about,
Sure.
about how much did we spend on phase 1?
I'd have to look that up, it's been a while.
Best guess, Mr. Counts.
At least a couple million, I would
At least a
say.
couple.
A lot of money.
I don't think it was, I believe, should have been.
It's all right.
We can look it up.
It's
I think
okay.
the track itself was the better part of $1 million.
Yeah.
For the material in the track. So I'd have to defer too, so I recall it was a few million.
300,000 sticks out of my mind for the fencing, so I don't know, we're in the, maybe between 1 and 2 million might be a good
Thank you.
good placeholder. So, potential items for phase 2 is additional parking up here in High Road, coming off High Road, new dugouts, additional seating for baseball, potentially moving the backstop back, because right now it's basically right on the cusp of being regulation. Adding a new water line to baseball for maintenance, and also a water fountain, concessions, things of that nature. Because right now there's a water line that goes from the field house all the way over, and as you can imagine, the pressure's not very good. Also, over here, potentially adding some additional parking over by softball, and adding an electronic scoreboard, which would probably be somewhere in this range for softball.
Does baseball have an electronic?
Baseball does have an electronic scoreboard. And the big one, the big item, would be addressing the field house, or track pavilion as we call it. Right now, it is not a 12-month facility. We have to winterize it every year, and the building's really reached probably its end of its life. So my recommendation is at least to explore potentially demoing that building and rebuilding a 12-month facility. And right now, what we have in there is 2 locker rooms, 2 public bathrooms, a concession stand, and storage. I'm not proposing to make it bigger. I'm just proposing to make it a 12-month facility. We looked at it back in 2018 to try to insulate and add heat to the building that's currently there. Not cost effective from that study. Now, we could absolutely look at that again. We could look at both versions, but this scope can be pretty fluid. You know, we need to narrow it down where we want to go when it comes to that track pavilion. Any questions on that?
What would be the reason for winter, making it a 12-month facility? I assume winter track is the only sport possibly that's over there, correct?
They want soccer, and
But we're not there in the winter.
Right.
we
There
do
was-
playoffs.
We do playoffs, but it's not winter.
That's October.
There was
It's
always a
November.
problem too in the springtime
Yeah.
for track,
The
that it
early
was
spring.
so cold in the
Right.
early spring
Right.
that they were still having like freezing pipes and stuff like that, so
Okay.
that's where something.
Frank and I go back and forth every year. He wants everything open like February 1st, and I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I just can't do it till we have consistent above 30-degree temperatures overnight. So that's the real advantage. And really by having heat, and you could potentially do other things out there as well. If we built 2 new buildings, team rooms, other facilities that could benefit us as well. So the options are there. My biggest thing would be to do the 12-month, but I'm flexible.
Do you have budget for this? I mean, I know we priced it out a couple of years ago, but have you priced it out again?
No, and that's, right now, Mr. Boyer and I have, I think, 2.5 million in the capital project plan that we've gone over. What I'm doing now is revisiting this with the board, and if the board gives me permission to go out and talk to Turf Track and Court, engage with them, we will basically bring back options to the board, price everything out, an a la carte list, and see what we can afford and what we can, or what we want to do.
Kind of the board's decision at that point, you know, are there parts of the project the board wants to do, are there parts of the project the board doesn't want to do? But that would break it all down to see the board's interest.
I think you really need to address the parking over there. There is no parking, I mean, I'm there every day. There is no parking in that lot because the buses and all the vans are in there. There's no parking.
The additional buses have created a new challenge.
There is, I mean, the coaches park and then that's it. And you do have elderly people that are,
Those couple handicap spots.
there's a couple, but honestly, sometimes the coaches park in those,
Oh.
and, which they shouldn't, but they do. And then you've got elderly people who have to walk all the way up to Flannery to walk over to the baseball field to see junior high soccer. So that is far.
Yeah.
That's really far, like,
You're all-
I mean, I don't wanna spend any more money,
No,
but
you-
I also think parking is a big issue
You are right,
over there.
all the sports over there struggle, so if
Yeah.
it's baseball, because, you know, we park buses in the back,
Yep.
softball, there's like a lane there, but you can't park along the lane because
Right.
it's grass. So all the sports over there struggle for parking.
Yeah, I don't know how much that adds to the project, but it's certainly be,
Well, that's something we're gonna explore,
yeah.
and we'll get pricing on all that. But yeah, especially now, we know parking is a big issue up there.
Can we ask the coaches not to park there? I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but where my daughter works at a restaurant, they're not allowed to park within 2 blocks of the restaurant because it should be open for customers. Like, why can they not drop their gear and go park somewhere else on game day? Do you know what I mean? Not necessarily like if it's only practice, but, you know, I don't think that's an unreasonable request to ask them to park over by the pool or something.
I totally agree they shouldn't be parking there, but
Especially
some of them
if
are
it's
not
on
teachers
handicap
and they're
spots.
coming,
From
and
the work.
they're coming from work and they are barely making it to the game. And honestly, to park at the pool, it's already filled up with spectators. So they would be late for the game, I would say. But I still agree, they shouldn't be parking in there.
Also parking buses is cool.
Yes, right, so there's buses at the pool.
So-
And there's no opportunity to cooperate with the borough at all and use any of, create parking
That's
And
what I
you
just asked him.
We
on their
did
space,
on-
like across, I'm thinking across High Road.
I think we talked with Michelle a couple of years back and looked at that spot on the other side of Old Mill. Nothing's off the table to explore.
I think that'd be worth exploring in this, if the board wants to look at all the options of what's there.
Just
We-
even going up High Road, we're not allowed to park on High Road, but we have that land on the right side. If we could even just do like some kind of like angled parking in some spots where it's the grass parking as opposed to an asphalt parking.
And we can also look at pervious too, which is the,
Yes.
yeah, pervious parking lots, and that will help with our land development permit as well. So-
Because I know the borough was talking about putting a parking lot down by the pool,
Across the left.
off across the road
Yeah,
there,
that's
and
it.
I don't know whatever happened with that.
Yeah, I don't think it ever went anywhere,
I
but
don't
that could
think
be,
it did.
we could reach out and certainly see if they wanna
Sure.
discuss it.
And then do we have, in the baseball area, are we handicap compliant in that area? So in case somebody's like in a wheelchair, do we
We
have a,
do, there's 2 spots at the top of the bus lot that we keep
but getting access to the, now that we've
So,
cleaned all that area up back there, do we
that-
have a,
That is what this will address. So if we put this parking lot in here, there would be an ADA way to get from this parking lot to the baseball
this
field.
whole thing's
Yeah.
here?
I
Currently,
don't think you can.
currently technically, you can't.
Right, and that fence is usually locked. I know it is a lot of times for junior high soccer,
I
sometimes
think
it's
they
locked.
open it
Do they open it?
for baseball game day. I'm not sure about
They
soccer.
don't for junior high soccer, no, because my parents had to climb up and through the woods to get to a game.
Wait a minute.
Right, I know, right, but that's what I'm saying, but I don't think that there is.
Coaches, they have keys.
They do, but they, they're already in the game.
No doubt, no doubt.
All right, we can follow up on that. We don't want people climbing through the
Yeah.
woods.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify, Mark, this is money we have set aside, or is this another loan? I mean, we're already $1.2 million over budget on this project.
We, through, when we were talking about the past 3 years with the difference between the bond prior to refinancing to refinancing, we've been basically saving money or putting money aside in our fund balance. That's where this money's coming from.
And what do we have put aside?
I think we're close to $3 million now.
When was the last time this stuff was all, I mean, it's been decades since this area has been updated.
Baseball's
So it
definitely
needs to be, we
80s.
need new dugouts because
Yeah.
they're flooding, like they are as old as dirt and everything else up there. It's time to work on this area. I'm still so confused as to why we don't have enough seating up there though. I mean, do you see people needing to sit or, it just
For
doesn't.
baseball or for?
Well,
Baseball or soccer?
well, for baseball, everybody pretty much sits up on the hill. And then for soccer, everybody, and the track meets, everybody pretty much stands. But
Yeah.
that has always been the number one complaint since that field went up, is why do we not have enough bleachers? Like, that's what I just don't understand with all this entire, like, we even talked about that.
Just from what
in
I've seen, and again,
2018.
just my opinion, regular season games, we seem to be okay. The thing that occasionally we've had a playoff game up there, that's the only one that I observed, that there just wasn't enough seating. But it seems like for regular season soccer and regular season track and field, now that the bleacher's been expanded, we have pretty good seating. I do think there's limited options for people who want to watch the baseball game. Some don't mind being on the hill, but there's one of those small portables. But there's not a lot of good options there for baseball. I don't believe softball. I don't think we have any. People just bring a chair, I think, right now.
Exactly. And
for
in this
softball.
plan, both of those would be addressed. Okay.
I'm sorry, one more question. So explain to me what the process would be, because you're talking about putting this together piecemeal, determining all the little things that we can do and what we can afford.
Sure.
How do you do that with going to bid? Because you would have to go to bid for the project. Like, so are we gonna get an estimate of how much we think it's going to cost?
There's a slide in here.
Yeah.
If you let them
Okay.
just bear with us a second.
Next slide. These are just the improvements. I skipped that. Next one, please. Okay. So if the board decides to go with turf track and court, which I will say, a lot of the work for phase 2, he's done already when he did the initial study, when he did the master plan. So if we decide to go with this proposal, it would be about $9,000 to get him to basically cost out construction estimates. They're not gonna be 100%, but they're gonna be a range. And construction estimate of all the improvements that we're looking at. And then yes, from that list, we can pick and choose which ones we want to go out to bid.
And would it be one bid, one contractor that would do everything?
Most likely, that's how it came out in phase one.
Who did that? Was it
Schlau.
Schlau that did it?
Mhm.
Okay.
And Mr. Boyer looked up the numbers, and we were all a little bit over. It was total 1.2 for phase one. We spent 1.2.
And I think we upped the second number for the building. So that's why this one.
But if we don't do it all now, we would have to wait how many years in order, because isn't it, you have to wait so long?
I don't think we're gonna be affected by that. We're not gonna reach
Okay.
the acre. The bulk of the acreage that we touched was during phase one
That's what I thought.
with the track.
And I should understand this too, maybe I'm not a good listener. Wasn't there also some exorbitantly expensive issue about running cable or fiber optic up there? Or what am I thinking about that dollars?
We addressed that.
Yeah, we addressed that. There was a number at one point, many years ago, but we actually addressed that through, E-rate and through Comcast. We have fiber up there now, so we have direct feed into all the cameras up there.
So there's no longer that issue
Nope.
with cable in the future?
That is all.
Wasn't it something else, wiring it for sound?
That's
Wi-Fi?
the sounds-
I think
That's
it's
also been
Wi-Fi.
taken care of.
Is it
Wi-
Wi-Fi?
Yeah. Wi-Fi is what Mr. Boyer's
That's,
talking
so
about.
it's all
Yeah.
taken care of? So
I
there's
think
no-
it was like $150,000. I think we
Okay.
did it for considerable.
Okay.
less.
Yeah, much less.
And are these two different decisions, engage an architect and turf and track, or is turf and track the architect?
That's the architect I would recommend, since he's done a lot of the preliminary work already. And if we choose to go with somebody else, they would have to kind of start fresh.
And have we talked to people that have used them as an architect and are satisfied with their?
I have references.
I will say that of all the projects we did, the past 3 projects, his project was almost spot on to his bid. Now, you're never going to be exact, but his was closest to the construction bid to the actual bid coming in. Now, obviously, that was pre-COVID, so a lot has changed between now and when we did this project, but he was very professional and he did a very good job for us.
And could you sometime, don't expect me to answer now, but sometime when we discuss this again, could you advise us of how many students use this facility throughout the year?
Oh, yeah. We can get those numbers together. No problem. And I'm not looking for a decision today. This is more informational. But the sooner we get him engaged, it's gonna be a decent length planning process, because we wanna get all the stakeholders together between our coaches, our athletic department, our youth, anybody who touches those fields.
And again, no push, but the board, I guess, Mr. Castelli, if the board wanted to, there'd be an action item at some point to engage the services for about that dollar figure.
That exactly.
And then that would allow that group to start the work.
Yep.
And then there would be multiple meetings to really go over that, and determine if the board wants to do any or part
Correct.
or none of the project.
Correct.
So would their fees then be, like, you pay the initial 9,000, then you wanna work with them moving forward, like, well, we don't want this, but we do want that. Is that part of the 9,000 as they continue to tweak it with us, or does that become, like, part of the bid process covers those fees, or is it gonna be more than 9,000 as we move forward with the project?
It's gonna be 9,000 to get us the bid,
Okay,
and then after that,
no matter how many times we go back and forth with them.
I don't know about no matter how many.
I know, but I'm
If
just
it's a
saying.
reasonable amount,
Okay.
I think we'll stay with.
All right, so that
9,000.
negotiation back and forth is part of the 9,000?
Correct, correct. Yeah, it's for him to do the study, and then he has a fee schedule associated with anything over and above.
And do we have council review that contract that we would have with the architect?
Of course.
And Mike,
Mhm.
would you be able to give us realistic dates, like when these facilities are used, like what months?
Oh, yeah, and that's when if hypothetically, if we move forward, we get a project, we get a scope, yeah, I'll be sitting down with athletics and I'll be looking for my windows where I can get in there and not affect students. That would be my goal. If that's not possible for some reason, we might have to move some games. I know we did that when we did phase 1, so we'll look at all that.
And did you want dates of when we're using the facility too,
Yes.
to understand?
Yeah, so like
Oh,
you
I'm
want a
sorry.
12-month building,
Mhm.
Right.
what are we, how many months are we currently using it and from what date to what date?
Oh, yeah, I can get you that.
Yeah.
Sorry, one more question. So what's it called? The teams have their fundraising and stuff like that. Boosters. So do other districts, I'd just be curious how it works across the district and how it worked with the field house at the football field. Because any money brought in from those concessions goes to the boosters. It doesn't come back to the district. So is there ever any booster involvement in covering the cost of building a new building? Because really, we're building, yes, we have locker rooms and bathrooms, which are necessary, but from a concession perspective, we're really only boosting their sales. And so how does that come into play? And did football have anything to do with when we built the field house?
I
At the
don't know,
football
I
field?
have to check into that.
And do any other districts, like, is there booster involvement in those buildings? Just curious.
I have to check.
Because I
into-
remember it was pretty expensive. I think we were looking at like $100,000 to
Just my
winterize that building.
General 2 cents doesn't mean there's not exceptions. It seems to be the boosters usually focus on things that are maybe like extra. So if you're building a building and you weren't having, let's say, a fancier, what do you call that, where the coaches sit up top?
Like an observation deck or a press
Yeah,
box.
and they came to you and said, hey, we get a real advantage by having this. But generally speaking, most of the booster groups don't have enough money to probably impact things like a building project. But if there's something extra that is a little above and beyond, decoration, memorializing, those tend to be in general what they do. And then during the season, I know Mrs. Kuhn is here, they provide the kids with a lot of things that maybe the kids
We pay for
would,
warm-ups, we pay for, food if they're traveling.
some meals.
Okay,
um,
just curious.
Yeah.
So usually the budgets are a little smaller. Now, I think football, over the years, at least the 7 years, 6 or 7, they've approached us with a couple projects that were a little different, and they had a donor who stepped forward and said, hey, I think there was a memorial plaque up there and maybe
There is.
a couple things that have, so it isn't out of the question, especially if one of the groups is maybe looking for something that's, I hate to say a little bit extra, a little bit cutting edge, or, we could certainly explore that. So if any of the groups, and those stakeholder groups are asking for things that, maybe that would be a good, back to say, hey, does your booster group, or do you have
Yeah,
donors?
we'll do A. If you want B, then you need to.
Right,
I'm
right,
just curious as to
Yeah.
how it works.
sure.
Speaking of donors, and I kind of breezed over this, we do have a potential donor for some baseball upgrades, specifically maybe the dugouts or some kind of improvements. So we do have something at this point.
It'd be interesting to know if there was anybody else interested in, needing something or something. It'd be interesting to see.
That's a good point. Yeah, certainly, I think, and I know WAIF is the one who I think put us in touch with the donor for the baseball dugout, so maybe there are some others out there that we could, look at. And I do have to say, Mr. Cavancelli, that your group, or the group that was here, did a really nice job with the Flannery Field Memorial area. I remember we had to redo that during construction. I was up there a couple times, and it looks really nice. So thank you to,
Appreciate that.
whether it's our crew or the other crew or both.
It's a combination.
Thank you. So I guess the question to the board is, do you want to see this back on an agenda so that that group could engage, or do you want to have some more discussion on bringing that group in?
I think that one of the questions I had for you guys is, knowing that we will have 5 to 6 new members on the board, do you feel that it's appropriate for us to approve this piece, going ahead with the architectural drawings, or do you feel that it's appropriate for that to wait until the board?
How long, just give you a ballpark, so let's say the board in September, October authorized them to render their drawings. Would it take them a period of time to pull that together?
2 to 3 months.
So it would ultimately probably be the new board deciding or not deciding, on.
The big project, it's just,
Yeah.
do you feel it's inappropriate to, spend $9,000 now I'm not advocating one way or another, spend $9,000 now, that if a new board comes on in January and isn't in favor of this at all, we've spent $9,000.
I'm also concerned, we're making progress, but we're still not done with our big construction project, and with anything that you do, there's always issues, and I would be comfortable waiting until the Hills construction is done, finished, etc.
But that probably won't be till the end of next summer, right?
That won't be till July of 20.
I think there's some significant issues there that have to be addressed. So I'd be okay moving ahead with the 9,000, but that's just me.
I agree with Rachel. I think to make it fair for every student in this district, we focus on one thing and the field hasn't been addressed in a very long time. And I just feel like we're doing a disservice to those kids that are utilizing that equipment, that area. So I think 9,000 is okay too. I would absolutely appreciate the new board coming in and hearing their take on all of it, but I'm okay going forward.
Mr. Hershey? Thoughts? Not to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I mean, yeah, I'm just kind of taking it all in. My initial impression is that it would be not a bad idea to start a process with the 9,000. But I don't think it would be good to go much beyond it before the new board was on, so.
Mr. Pottieger, same?
Yeah, I find it interesting because the big project we just did, you and I came in, Rachel, much later, on that. It was kind of, I think, seemed pretty far along before we got there. It felt like it was just one of those things that was already moving momentum. So from that standpoint, I didn't feel that we had much decision in that, but I felt okay with it because of the board prior having made that decision. So I'm okay to do it, especially because it's not a huge commitment. It's something we've had on the books and plan for quite some time. So I think, definitely things that need to be done.
Mr. Redner, you're okay with this idea?
Sorry, you cut out. You asked me, right?
Oh, yeah, just generally, if you felt okay with going ahead
Okay.
with the 9,000.
Yeah.
I mean,
When you were speaking, for some reason it went blitzed and you said Mr. and I figured it was me. But I'm in full support of it. I mean, for all the reasons everyone has said. It's, I don't want to say overlooked because that's throwing, I don't want to make it sound like I'm minimizing anybody's efforts over the years, but it has been sorely needed, I guess I'll say it that way, for quite some time. And, to do the upfront free 9,000, I understand. I mean, likely being one of those members that's not here, I get it. But I think we should, as a board, we should at least do the due diligence moving forward. And then at least that box is checked, so to speak, for the new board to make the full-scale decision on.
Okay. Is that good for what you need from us?
I will get it on the next business agenda for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about construction or facilities in general? Okay. You're welcome.
All right. Junior, senior high school club update, Mr. Secretary.
Switching gears, there's some good news, and just to summarize, really from Dr. Jones and Dr. Woodard has worked on this myself. I'll do the speaking tonight, but certainly it's been a team working through the process. So the first screen I have is just an overview of the process that people would work through if they want to form a club. So it takes a little bit of work. Certainly we encourage, whether it's at West Reading or here at the junior senior high school, to first sit down and student or students interested, speak with the principal. Get the principal involved in the discussion, and that's a good way to go back and forth for the students to learn that if you want something, you have to take the steps necessary to present what it is you want and move forward. So that's kind of step one. And then the students secure a club advisor. Sometimes the club advisor is right there from the start as part of the group. Sometimes the students have to go out and find out who would be interested in helping them in that topic. Then they have to the club advisor does a written proposal, which just summarizes the club, the rationale, how it may connect or support the curriculum, what activities they would do. And then what took place just last Friday is each year here at the junior senior high school, there's a club fair. And in the club fair, the gym is filled with tables. And typically at each table, there's students, sometimes an advisor if they have a free period. And each grade level comes in, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. And they get to choose, and 12th, clubs that they want to participate in. And they get to talk to some students who are in the club. Some of the kids have elaborate handouts and gadgets and gimmicks to really bring in attention. So Dr. Woodard and I, along with other administrators, got to walk around on Friday. We do have some pictures. I know Ms. Terrie is going to be posting some things. It was great to see all the students kind of interacting, older students helping younger students. And so the two clubs I'm going to speak with you about in a moment did, because they followed this process, they were allowed to have a table to see if there were other students interested. And the point we want to see in there is not just that a bunch of 12th graders are interested, because those students are going to move on. You want to see that you have students in junior high, high school, because the goal would be, if the board approves a club, that it could sustain itself. So that really takes place. And then, just as a note, and this is not uncommon, oftentimes we have teachers or students who just informally operate something they're interested in after school. And usually they speak with the principal, or maybe it's a club that wants to form at some point. So there are activities that take place that aren't paid clubs. And sometimes that's something they do while they're in the process of that year or so to make a proposal to the principal. So we have two clubs, exciting to speak with you about tonight. The first one is the Star Club. Now, the parent organization is Voice of Berks. I know Mrs. Kuhn is affiliated with that, and I believe the official word is Stand Together Against Racism. I think the students are morphing that, perhaps. It might be students against, they might be using different, but the same STAR acronym, just with different words. And you can see their mission: to address racism and justice in the community through education, dialogue, and really student-initiated, student-supported, and student-facilitated. And they take a leadership role in that. Want to encourage a welcoming community that will educate, acknowledge, and respect the differences of everyone in our community. And then really focuses on learning and discussing historical and current events. As we know, we look through the last few years, there's certainly been events that have had our students upset. And this would be another outlet for our students to be able to process and understand and work through some of the things that happen, not just here in our community, but in the state and nationally. We do have a proposed club advisor in Mr. Delt, and working with Mr. Boyer and our current club stipends, we identified $714 would be the initial stipend, and that's pretty typical for some of the newer clubs. There is a process that if a club over time demonstrates that they have a broader reach, maybe they have more students and more activities, they can petition to have that revisited. But this is, a few years ago we started a club called the GSA, which is the Gay Straight Alliance. And this was initially where the club was as they're getting their feet under them. So pretty similar stipend is recommended. So that's the Star Club. And then the second one, and then certainly you can take any answers or questions, discussion. Debate Club was around a few years ago. Mr. Alcaro had a pretty good debate club going. As he took on another position outside the district, it kind of went away. We do have Mr. Winson, who is one of our social studies history teachers, very interested. And then you can see here, really strong match to, I know Dr. Woodard could do a much better job than me, probably talking about our listening and speaking and some of the goals that we have in our curriculum. But these students would really strengthen their public speaking, their problem solving, ability to think on the fly and react, and not just say what's on your mind, but document what you're saying, and do that with evaluating resources that are out there that support your positions. You can see some examples they cited of some of the current events that the students would probably engage in. And the goal would be first semester to get together, practice in-house, and maybe with the goal second semester of getting out and maybe being involved with either a competition against another school or maybe a competition that allows clubs in general to come to. So they do want to get back to competing. I think the last few years that it existed, it was more of an in-house kind of program, but they actually want to get out and interact with students from other schools. And the club stipend proposed is the same one, is $714. Big picture with clubs, and I know Mr. Hershey, you're new, the board approves the list of club stipends and the teachers assigned to those clubs each year. We're hopeful to have that for the board, maybe in the next meeting, if not, definitely in October. We're just working through a few changes. So most of the clubs, year to year, the teacher would stay with the club, and their stipend might go up a little bit because they have more experience. The board approved a contract with WAEA, and one of the conditions of the contract is that the board and the association would continue to revisit this. So in the bigger picture, these are kind of the current numbers. There's been no change. I know Mr. Boyer is continuing that process to explore what that would do to satisfy the goals of both sides of that contract agreement. So it isn't, we do believe we'll be back in front of the board at some point this year in a deeper discussion about the big picture of the stipends, the points assigned, and the values, because that's something we promised and the association promised. But under the current dollars, and Ms. Barrett is aware, we need to move forward. We can't wait for that to be resolved, because that may take some time. And these clubs are starting, now for the year. So those are the two proposed clubs. Dr. Jones supports both these. We do have one club that won't be operating, and that's the literary club. If you recall, that was Mrs. Yock's. And it's been reconfigured to be consolidated into another writing club. So they're going to actually try to make sure, instead of two small clubs, kind of one larger club with more student interest, putting two writing. I think one's the Chariot, one was the Lit magazine, and they're going to work together to combine it. So one stipend would be removed from the list or eliminated because the group will work together, and then these two smaller stipends would come in, actually probably be a net decrease. But I'll have the whole list together for you hopefully in the next week or so, possibly for the 18th or at least by our next meeting.
The weekly,
What's that?
the meeting weekly, both clubs?
So both clubs did, they were estimating 2 to 3 times a month. So maybe not every, just with students, but they were looking to get a couple times a month. I believe with the start, and I know Mrs. Kuhn could probably, I think they're probably going to want to look at some activities, educational activities. So it might take a little bit for them to find, what it is that they're looking to do.
Wilson has a really well-run club that's been going for about 2 years,
Good.
and I'm sure they'll model based on what they do. But yeah, they'll do a lot of, like this summer, for example, they went to some playground programs and on a younger kid level, like read some books and stuff and talked a little bit about race and that kind of thing. So they do, I think, want to eventually go out and do projects, but I think initially it'll be a lot of in-house conversations.
Right.
And do you think perhaps, Mr. Hershey, we did have, as a board, we had a lot of community members reach out to us regarding the Star Club, and they were concerned that it hadn't been endorsed by the school and wanted to know why, and we were very clear about explaining to them that we do endorse it and how we had supported it in the past and what steps they had to take. Do you think maybe we could, when we approve it, if we approve it, circle back to those parents and just follow up by email to say, hey, just wanted to let you know that it's been approved and.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I know Dr. Jones met with, or spoke with a handful of parents, and some weren't parents, they were just, community members, so we can certainly circle back to them.
Are these clubs, I noticed, having a new 7th grader, like some clubs are just junior high, some are junior, senior high, so like are these clubs 7 to 12 or are they
Yeah.
9 to 12?
Yeah, I believe both of these are 7 through 12, but we do have some clubs that are geared more for 7, 8, and some 9, 12. And honestly, I know Dr. Witter says, I think we need more clubs that are specifically geared 7, 8. So maybe as we work with the teachers to reconfigure, in the bigger picture, that might be something we need to, because sometimes a 7th and 8th grader might not be as inclined to join, if it's a club that's a lot older students. But these are 7 through 12.
The cooking club, I think, is a junior high version and a senior high version. So when there's a lot of students interested, they do segment into the 2 age groups. But I think we want to do a better job of increasing the opportunities for our kids at 7th and 8th because they don't have a lot of other opportunities to get involved as many as the high school level.
Along the same lines, I guess another question, maybe this is, I guess this is right, but like, beyond the club fair, is there continued recruitment, or is that kind of like the one chance? So I'm thinking of a sense, my daughter's a little introverted, so this might be more personal, but like if you miss that.
You can join a club at any time.
Okay.
Kids can always join. So if, let's say you meet your daughter meets some friends or a teacher and wants to talk about joining the club, they're open, so you can always join. The one thing they can't do is start new clubs,
Right.
but the students themselves can always join a club. And as some of the board members have had multiple children through, it's not uncommon for students to be in several clubs and then try to somehow mix them with their busy schedules. But the nice part, we still have that period at 2:35, so students who want to stay can stay. I believe the late bus is about 3:10, and so even if you need transportation home, you can get that. And then some students might stay a little later if there's a special activity. But it's still a good opportunity to be involved in the clubs. Like I say, Club Fair was very impressive. I don't know, Dr. Woodard, if you have anything you want to add, it was pretty exciting.
It was exciting, and students are really persuasive. They give out candy, and, so anything to get others interested in their clubs, so.
So if the board is in support of these two clubs, what we would do is we would enter these onto the list so that ultimately when the board approves the whole list, these would be on there. So if the board's interested in moving forward, we'll kind of get the list together, add these two in, remove the lit magazine, and let the board hopefully then approve the whole list.
And that list comes from Corey?
Yeah, well, in HR, Mrs. Weiss works on it, Dr.
No,
Jones.
but I'm just saying, selfishly, Rachel and I have done ski club for a long time, and our stipend is 0. And
Yes.
so when I look at that and I think like that's one bus for one trip, do you know what I mean? Like, so who do I petition to say, gosh, it would be really nice for the ski club to get a little stipend also, so that we can take the burden off of our students. Not that it would be collected by the chaperones, but it would be put back into the club. So who do I talk to?
That's stipend specifically for the advisors.
Right.
So-
Right, but our advisors are nice and would like to give it back to the club.
Understood, having
Having been there.
If it's the two of you,
So you
can't
can't
have a stipend. If it's the
You
two
could
of
Well,
you,
that's my point, but Molly
you could get a stipend,
Merle
put it
has
back
kind of
into the
taken
club if you want.
over.
Yes.
And I just feel like it could be money that's put into a club. If you can't pay the advisors, maybe you could put money toward the club, so that it takes a little bit of money away from what the kids are paying.
I think it's probably easier to pay the advisors and have the advisors give it to the club.
We can't be.
so we haven't had any discussion on that, so I don't have a lot.
I'm just, so my question to you is, who do I talk to? Do I go to Corey and say, hey, we would like to propose this?
Well, Dr. Jones would probably turn to Dr. Woodard and I and say, I just had a great conversation with you, what should I do? So I think, I don't know, I think Avita and Ski Club have traditionally been, non-paid, and I know Mrs. LaScala, who's not our employee, has agreed to do Avita. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know enough about the ski club probably
Well, we can
to.
take it out of this meeting and
Yeah.
discuss it another time.
Maybe
It's just a
if
thought that I'm.
we got more info, I could get more info, how many kids are involved, how much the kids pay, what time would actually, so like, I know with the, like these clubs, like, they documented what the advisor would do and how it matches maybe to support the curriculum and things like that. So those would be the kind of things I guess we'd have to think about if there was to switch over to being a paid club. Right now, it's on the list as 0, but we could certainly revisit it. It doesn't mean, the board approves the list, but the board could always revisit something on there if the board collectively wants to.
Is that one of the most popular clubs, the ski club?
It seems pretty popular.
It sells, within 5 minutes, it's sold.
So we are,
Kids seem
we
pretty happy.
can only do one bus,
Yeah.
because it is expensive, so there's a lot of kids that are missing out on that club.
We had to change it. It used to be 7 to 12. Now it's 9 to 12 because there's just too many kids.
And it is a lot for a 7th or 8th grader too. I think.
The 7th and 8th graders are a little too young to do it. It's not, we as advisors don't feel comfortable sending them out on the mountain by
There's
themselves.
some safety
Yeah,
issues.
So, yeah.
So since we're buried a little bit from the agenda,
Yeah.
let's table this conversation, let Mrs. Waxler, Mrs. Kuhn follow up with Mr. Saboria and bring it back if we need an agenda item later.
So
Yeah.
are we in support of these two in general, just by head nodding, or in support? Okay, thank you. We'll move forward.
Anybody have anything else? Reminder that we're gonna stay for an executive session, but do I have a motion to adjourn? A second? Second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Bye.
Thank you.